I love the imagery of the caught, not taught. And for 1,500 years, the Catholic faith was caught, and then the sort of catechetical movement came in, and now it was taught, and then now we're seeing Catholic schools closing, and we're seeing all sorts of Catholic education maybe somewhat disappearing. How do we have the faith caught again? And then do we infect with action, with word? How do we evangelize now?
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Great to be with you, and thank you. I mean, there's great wisdom to be learned, I think, from those first 1,500 years. Not that we can go back ways. But when I say that it was caught more than taught, now there was some teaching, but it was very minimal, the number of people who participated. There were the great monastic schools, the great cathedral schools, but they served probably no more than 4 or 5% of the population, if even that. In other words, the Western world became Christian simply by picking it up along the way, in the home, in the parish, in the village. And a great deal of it was by osmosis, by enculturation, rather than by intentional instruction, which isn't to minimize the importance of intentional instruction. It's terribly important, but it can't do it anymore. And in a sense, when you think about what happened with the invention of schools and the spread of schooling in the Western world and then moving into universal education, we began to, when you think religious education, we began to think schooling of some kind or other, either a parish school, parish program of religious education. And again, they're terribly important, but they can't replace the home. They can't replace the village. They can't replace the parish. So what this issue tries to do is to go back and think of all of the almost incidental ways, experiences of faith, especially of a lived faith, like sending young people into an immersion experience, into a retreat experience, into a pilgrimage experience. The rituals of the family. There's 2 wonderful essays in here, one by a Latino woman, Professor Nancy Pineda Madrid, who looks back on her Mexican-American experience and the kind of popular spiritualities that were carried on in the home that really, in many ways, were the source of how she caught her faith. The other essay is by one of is by Professor Ruth Langer, and writing out of her Jewish tradition. Rabbi Langer was raised in a devout Jewish home, and again, it was the rituals of the home. It was the Sabbath. It was keeping Passover. It was keeping kosher that, in a sense, inculcated her Jewish identity and faith. I think Catholicism, in particular, is rich in those kind of old possibilities and symbols and practices. And if we don't like the old ones, we should invent new ones. So if we can't get the whole family to sit down and say the rosary together every night, I can never get my family to do that, there are other things we can do every night that are equally capable of nurturing people's faith identity.
So what's the 21st century version of, let's say, I have a family and my children, I can't get them to say the rosary. What's something that's comparable to that still sort of incubates the faith and passes on the faith?
And you know, it can be something terribly simple, Matt. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. Quick anecdote, I gave a workshop on this recently, and a young woman came up to me afterwards and said, Tom, fine for you to speak, you know, that you're a 2-parent family and you only have 1 kid. I'm a single mom and I have 3 children. Now, what rituals can I do in my home that can hand on the faith to them? I'm busy, I've got to attend to the homework, I've got to cook dinner for them. I said to her, look, how long would it take for each evening before I asked her the age of her children, and they were like 8, 6, and 5. I said, how long would it take to take each child in your arms every night before they go to bed, give them a hug, and say, God loves you and I love you. Sleep well. I said, how long would it take? She said, 5 seconds. I said, do it every night, or do it most nights. And those children will grow up knowing that they're loved deeply by God and by you. That's faith. That's the basis. Then you can build. You can teach them the creed. You can teach them the catechism. You can teach them the dogmas and doctrines of our faith, and they'll catch, because there's a grounding there that is faith at its richest. So it doesn't take an awful lot. I think each family has to try to imagine what to do themselves.